Hello to everyone. Mike Martinego of SportMedBC here. We're so glad you could join us for the fifth and final SportMed Safety Webinar of 2014. Today we'll be talking about post-event recovery. In all, we're doing a series of 8 webinars. We started in August of this year, and this is our last one of 2014. We will continue, though, with 3 more into early 2015. Just before I throw it over to our Manager of Sport Safety and Event Services, Paul Dwyer, want to mention that if you have any questions or comments, any feedback throughout, we will try our best to answer to it during the webinar. There's a toolbar on the right-hand side of the screen that allows you to send us questions and comments. If not during, myself and Paul will respond after the webinar. As well, this webinar will be posted online at sportmedbc.com and our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/sportmedbc. So be sure to check us out if you happen to miss anything. For now, I'll pass it over to Paul Dwyer, who's our Manager of Sport Safety and Event Services, and he'll take us through post-event recovery.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to those that are joining us tonight. As Mike mentioned, my name is Paul Dwyer. I'm the Manager of Sport Safety and Event Services with SportMedBC. So, as Mike mentioned, we're going to be looking tonight at post-event recovery. So some of the topics that we're looking to cover tonight. Firstly, I just want to speak briefly on some of the factors that are going to actually affect our athletic performance. We need to take those into measure, obviously, when we're looking at what we need to do when we're recovering. We'll speak briefly about fatigue that happens during competition, and naturally how we feel fatigue and where the fatigue comes from is going to differ not only by individual, but of course by sport and what our competition involves in our respective sports. We'll look at planning a recovery, incorporating a cool down into our recovery, and then of course an important piece, post-event nutrition. So some of the main factors that actually affect our athletic performance naturally is our training status, how much we're putting into our training, and what our actual what the forces are in terms of our training schedule, intensity, duration. Of course, our nutrition also will affect our athletic performance. Our psychological as well as our emotional state will have a great effect on us as well, and our health status and the environment, and I'll speak briefly to each of these. So when we speak about training, really we're talking about our volume of training, the intensity of our training, the duration that we're putting into it, the type of training we're doing, the fatigue that's associated with it, and then of course the recovery planned within our training itself. So naturally each sport is going to have a different level of intensity, a different volume, different duration and type. If you're training for an endurance event versus training for a power event, obviously you're going to have a lot of different variables, but these are factors that of course are going to affect our ability to perform at our best. Nutrition involves obviously our status in terms of balance of proper carbohydrate, protein, fat, nutrient intake, and then of course our hydration status and our electrolyte or fluid balance. All of these pieces are really important in terms of our athletic performance. Another big piece of athletic performance that we don't give a lot of talk to is our psychological status and our emotional status. Our psychological status can involve a lot of stresses from external sources as well as internal sources. So internal sources being within the sport itself, perhaps there's stresses coming from competition, and then externally perhaps there's stresses from academics, from finances, from our sleep status. The list could go on. In terms of our emotional status, again, this is very dependent on the individual, but relationships, perhaps our quality of life, again, finances, academics, family issues, it can be a lot of different things. These are all pieces that affect our performance within athletics. And then lastly, just briefly on health status and environment. So our health status, really here we're referring to whether there's any existing illness, whether we've got an injury, an infection, and again, our sleep status and fatigue, and how we feel just energy-wise. A lot of these things are going to contribute to our ability to perform. And lastly, environment. So our environment, when we speak about environment, we're really looking at temperature, the humidity in the air, and altitude. All of these actually have an adverse effect on athletic performance. So the reason I bring up all these factors in terms of affecting athletic performance is that each of these are things that we need to consider when we're looking at our recovery status as well. So all of these factors, they can influence our performance. The interesting part about sport is that we spend almost all of our time focusing on our training and on our competition, when the majority of our time is actually spent in the recovery from our activities involved with training. So it's very crucial that we make a recovery plan that is a big part of our training plan overall. So it's important in terms of recovery to talk about fatigue and how fatigue affects us and what fatigue really is in terms of sport. So there's a number of ways to define fatigue, and there's a number of reasons why it occurs. And because the reasons are so variable, it's important to address all these variables in order to promote optimal recovery. So there's been many definitions, but one of the definitions in terms of fatigue within competition is any exercise-induced reduction in the maximal capacity to generate force or muscle output. So that can be a lot of different reasons why this might happen. Some of the most important ones in terms of our ability to have an effect on recovery are the metabolic processes or the cellular processes that happen that make us feel the fatigue that we feel, that make us feel perhaps the muscle soreness we feel, or the fatigue that we feel in terms of not being able to push any harder within our sport. So some of those processes may involve the depletion or the reduction of phosphocreatine, the reduction of ATP, the reduction of glycogen stores within our muscles that give us energy, perhaps lactate accumulation and excess hydrogen formation within the muscle tissue, and then of course fluid loss and fluid depletion, which obviously makes cellular processes not happen as well. So these metabolic processes will happen within sport and then have an effect on our ability to perform, making us feel fatigue. Then we've got these neural types of fatigue. So this can come in the form of neuromuscular fatigue. So a lot of the time at the neuromuscular junction itself, chemical processes can be broken down with fatigue, and neuromuscular firing patterns may not happen as effectively. Also, the central nervous system has been known to respond to fatigue and start to shut down some processes, sort of as a protective restraint against further muscle breakdown. And then naturally, we've also got fatigue that affects us in a psychological or emotional way, and this can be dependent on the athlete and the situation, whether it be regarding event results, something that's happened within the race or within an event or the competition, as well as the individual's emotional state. So when looking at planning recovery, there are a number of things that we need to consider. Recovery will really differ for all different sports, and this is really dependent on the demands of the sport and the physiological impacts of maximal effort in competition. So, for example, a downhill ski racer on a competition day would perhaps do 2 runs at 1 minute and 30 seconds each, versus a cross-country ski racer who on a competition day might race 15 to 30 kilometers. So these use different energy systems, so therefore planning for recovery is going to be quite different for those two sports. Some of the goals of our recovery are normalization of function in the body, so also a normalization of our homeostatic equilibrium. Another goal is to replenish our energy sources, and then on a cellular level, we're looking to reconstruct our cellular processes and our enzymatic functions. So how we plan our recovery is really dependent on what the stresses are for us. Are they physical stresses? So are they the stresses of the sport themselves, which has caused these metabolic stresses, or are they emotional or psychological stresses? How we plan for our recovery really needs to be dependent on where those stresses are coming from. And really, it's important to incorporate all pieces. So in terms of strategies, it's important to make sure that recovery is part of our full training program, so not just on a day per basis. We need to make this as part of our training program across the board. So we're not only planning recovery after competition, we're also planning recovery after training sessions all the way through our training program. Similarly, we also need to make a nutrition and a hydration plan as part of our recovery. So how are we going to refuel? How are we going to rehydrate after competition? Another big piece is how we're going to manage our psychological and emotional state. And then, of course, sleep is a very seldom talked about piece of the recovery plan, but naturally it's a very important piece in terms of our athletic performance. So again, all of these are dependent on sport and naturally on the athlete's individual schedule and individual needs. So I want to talk about incorporating a cool down into our recovery process. Often you'll hear cool down as synonymous with active recovery. So really what a cool down is about is incorporating this immediately after competition as well as in the days following competition. And this should be part of our training program over the long haul, including cool downs but also active rest days. So a cool down is about incorporating a low intensity exercise, allowing our body to gradually return from what's considered an exertional state to a resting state, or at least near resting state. And what we're aiming for here is to gradually lower our heart rate and our breathing rate to resting levels. We're looking to help aid in the dissipation of cellular waste products in the muscle tissue. We're looking to reduce muscle stiffness, soreness, cramping, and spasm, and really about prepping ourselves for our next competition or training session in terms of physically prepping our bodies and mentally prepping our minds for what's ahead. So a cool down can really consist of a number of different things depending on the sport, but most of the time we're looking to incorporate some activity where we're having a low impact or low intensity run, bike, swim, paddle, ski, any of these sorts of physical activities where we're really looking to move the body and start to lower the heart rate while actually putting the body through a bit of an active process. So this can last, depending on the sport, anywhere from 5 minutes to 20 minutes. Secondly, we're looking to incorporate some stretching. So really our goal here is to help relax muscle and help muscle return to its normal length, as well as avoid any of the adverse effects from activity, including the cramping, muscle spasm, muscle tightness, and muscle soreness. So static stretching is this stretching where we're in a static or non-moving position doing holds of 20 to 30 seconds and 2 to 3 repetitions per muscle group. So it's a really focused stretch of the muscles used during competition. Hydrotherapy can include cold or hot therapies. So a lot of the time, you know that cold is used to treat acute injuries. Hot therapies may be used to loosen muscle and sore muscles. And so a number of different cold and hot therapies can be used. It's quite an exhaustive topic, so we won't get into it in detail. But then also a cool down might include some modalities, some therapeutic modalities. So this might include massage, compression, electrotherapy, or a number of other modalities provided by a healthcare professional. The important thing with the cool down is to choose a low-impact activity that will not only be effective for the physiological purpose, but also for psychological and emotional purposes. So it's also important to prep our mind, not only our bodies, for our next competition or training bout. So in terms of the benefits of a cool down, in relation to the activity that we're doing in the cool down, so whether this be a bike or a run or a light swim, we're looking to more rapidly return our lactate concentrations to a resting level. Okay, we're also looking to remove any metabolites created through cellular processes when we're burning lots of energy. In terms of stretching, we're looking to reduce muscle stiffness, spasm, and cramping, and restore our muscles' length and function. Hydrotherapies, again, they have a number of applications and a number of benefits. Some of them include decreased pain, decreased inflammation, edema formation, muscle spasm, muscle soreness, and the list really goes on. And in terms of therapeutic modalities, again, this list could be really exhaustive, but some of the benefits can be increased tissue healing, decreased pain and inflammation, increased blood flow, increased lymphatic drainage, and even with massage, sometimes we can get decreased anxiety and stress. So choosing these pieces in our cool down can really affect how we perform in the future. The important thing is here is with endless literature and a lot of anecdotal evidence even out there, the important thing is to consult with coaches and medical staff regarding which practices are going to be the best for your respective sport and for your individual needs. Looking at post-event nutrition, it's important to make this a big part of your plan in terms of recovery. It should be not only a part of your plan after competition, but a part of a greater nutritional plan that not only addresses your lifestyle, but addresses diet in terms of how it's going to best affect your ability to perform. So this isn't solely based on just before and after meals, but on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis. What we're looking for with nutrition is not only quantitative but qualitative, so planning how much we're going to eat and what foods we need to eat to make us perform at our best. Hydration is also a really important element of it, and our goal overall, to simplify things, would be really to consume sufficient calories, including all of our macronutrients and micronutrients, to restore our energy sources, and also a sufficient amount of water or sports drinks in some situations to replace the fluids lost during exercise. So some of the guidelines in terms of nutrition are to include about 40 to 65% of your diet carbohydrates. So our carbohydrates are our main source for food energy. This consists of obviously our vegetables, fruits, grains, bread, cereals, including proteins. These are the builders of tissue and help us repair our muscles from the damage that we go through in sport. Our proteins are meats, nuts, seeds, eggs, and alternative protein sources as well. Soy products can be really effective in terms of helping rebuild tissue. Our proteins should make up approximately 10 to 35% of our diet. And then fats. These are often looked down upon, but our fats are absolutely essential as an energy source. They help us store energy, and they're really important for the absorption of vitamins as well. And the fats should make up about 20 to 35% of our diet. And the sources for fats can come from meats, oils, butter, nuts, avocados. Really what we're looking for in our nutrition is to replenish the sources of our energy so that we can compete again at the same or better capacity. So really these foods help us repair and rebuild muscles. They'll strengthen our immune system, and they'll replenish the energy stores that we've lost. So in terms of our nutrition directly after competition, our main goal should be to replace our muscle glycogen that's lost during the event, and we do this through carbohydrate consumption. The carbohydrates we ingest are converted to glycogen, which is stored in the muscle. The glycogen is broken down to create energy, and this is the most important piece in terms of competition and our ability to perform in our sport. Secondly, after we've competed, we want to speed our muscle recovery and repair by eating protein-rich foods that will help provide the amino acids necessary for muscle protein synthesis. And a basic guideline is to aim for a 4-to-1 ratio of carbohydrates to proteins. So immediately after competition or within the first 30 minutes to an hour, we want to make sure that we eat a diet consisting of carbohydrates and proteins. This will really help us in terms of repairing ourselves and getting us ready for the next competition. So we often hear about a recovery window. So research has shown that we've got an optimal window in terms of being able to best prep our bodies or restore our bodies with the nutrients lost during competition. So that window is about 30 to 60 minutes, and if we eat within this period of time, this will increase our absorption efficiency by 2 to 4 times as much. And it's been shown that if we can ingest a diet of carbohydrates and proteins within that first hour, our levels of muscle glycogen 6 hours afterwards will be much higher than if we've waited till 2 hours after competition. So it's really important to make sure that you incorporate a plan for when and how you're going to get that meal into you after competition. In terms of hydration, our main goals should really be about replenishing the fluids we've lost via sweat and respiration during competition. So naturally, when we're competing, we're going to sweat a lot, and that's our way of our bodies cooling ourselves. But during competition, we'll lose a lot of fluids through sweat. It's been shown that if we lose even as much as 1 to 2% of our body fat during competition, that our performance will actually begin to decrease quite a bit. So it's really important that we try to replace those fluids lost while we're competing, but then of course after competing as well. So our goal is to restore our electrolyte balance, and our electrolytes are these sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium pieces that are really important to replace, and we can do this often with a sports drink, and if not, we are going to try to incorporate a diet that includes these important minerals as well as drink water. So it's important that the athlete monitors their own hydration. We can do this in 2 main ways, one of them being body weight before and after competition, the other being their own urine analysis. So looking for a clear colored urine will obviously show that you are well hydrated. And barring that you have a good nutrition and hydration plan, we want to make sure that we're drinking at least 500 to 600 milliliters of water or a sports drink within the first hour after competition. Okay, so as I mentioned, each sport and individual will have different needs and different recovery plans. So these pieces are really going to help you guide and help you to create an effective plan. So the important thing to remember is that you should incorporate all the components in your recovery plan that are going to contribute to your athletic performance. So in terms of training, incorporating an active cool down immediately after and in the days following will help you to prep the body and the mind for the next event. In terms of nutrition, we want to ensure that we've got a timely and effective food and hydration plan. And we want to choose activities within our recovery plan that are going to be low impact and low stress, and they're going to be in an environment that aren't going to distract us from negative thoughts and negative situations. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we have a very good, adequate sleep plan that includes 8 to 9.5 hours of sleep depending on the demands of our sport. I want to thank you very much for joining us for this webinar. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to ask me, and you can contact me at the address or phone number below. Thanks to everybody, and happy holidays. I'll pass it over to Mike.
And thanks again, Paul. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, passing along their thoughts. For tips and tools, resources, a variety of information on courses and events and workshops, be sure to visit us at SportMedBC.com. Paul mentioned how to connect with him. For more from SportMedBC, some of the addresses on screen right there, youtube.com/SportMedBC, Facebook.com/SportMedBC, and Twitter.com/SportMedBC. The website, SportMedBC.com. And as mentioned earlier, if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll find a number of topics and webinars. Paul's already covered shoulder injuries, hydration, stretching. The list goes on, so check out our YouTube channel. Our next webinar will be in mid-January of 2015. Stay tuned for details, and be sure to check back for information and updates through our website and various social media channels. For Paul Dwyer, I'm Mike Martinego. A very happy holidays to everyone, and thanks again for tuning in to this SportMed Safety Webinar.